and welcome to another Ghost Light Series interview. I'm very honored to have with us today the Congressman of Colorado's 2nd Congressional District, Joe Neguse. Thank you for being with us, Congressman.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
We appreciate your time. I know it's a crazy time for you and for our country, and we appreciate you spending some time with us. First and foremost, can you talk a little bit about your personal relationship with the arts? Have there been specific artists or moments or experiences that have kind of touched you or influenced your life?
Yeah, well, of course, there's so much to unpack there, right? I mean, arts are such an integral part of who we are as Americans and fundamentally as human beings, right? And so certainly no exception, in terms of my upbringing and the impact that arts have had on my life. And of course, I consider myself very lucky to be able to call the 2nd Congressional District home, where we are very, very blessed to have just incredible arts here in our district in Boulder County, in Larimer County, in our Central Mountain counties as well. So, me personally, obviously, I love all kinds of music and have a fairly eclectic music taste. I served actually on the board of directors for the Colorado Symphony for several years a while back. I love going to the Symphony. Of course, I love going to the Denver Center for the Performing Arts, and have also seen shows here in our district at the Boulder Dinner Theater with my wife. We're both particularly big fans of the performances there, and have also, of course, been to the Dairy and just many others. I mean, again, Boulder is, of course, world renowned in terms of its contributions to art in any number of different areas, right? Obviously, from the physical arts to music to acting and so much else.
You mentioned you're a big music fan and you have eclectic taste, so rattle off some of your favorite artists for us.
Oh my gosh. Well, so again, when I say eclectic, I really mean it. So, I'm a big fan of Talib Kweli, let's say, for example, right, and Common, but also Mos Def, right, but then fan of Journey as well, and John Mayer, right? So, it's eclectic in every sense of that word. My wife and I have very different music tastes, so sometimes she kind of makes fun of me for, how could I like, Journey and Mos Def at the same time? But yeah,
that's all right. No judgment here on Journey or Mos Def. You're So, as someone who runs an arts organization, and I'm sure you've talked to other folks like me, it's a really challenging time for arts organizations in Colorado and around the country, most of which are shuttered and unable to provide services and unable to meet with their constituents. I was doing a little research for this, and I was looking at a 2018 NEA study that said that the arts sector contributes $760 billion to the U.S. economy, which I was surprised to find out is more than agriculture or transportation. Now, obviously, there are a lot of different businesses that need support as we go through this current crisis moment. But what do you think the federal government's role is, or what do you think they can do specifically to help arts organizations both now in this difficult period and when we return to some sense of normalcy and we are able to perform again?
Well, I think the federal government's role is critical. Just as you said, in addition to obviously the economic impact that you articulated, and it's hundreds of billions of dollars, across the country, and then that certainly includes here in Colorado from a consumer demand standpoint, right, and the ability downstream in terms of the jobs that the arts create, both here and again across the country. There's also the moral argument. I mean, that, again, arts provide us with such a rich part of our cultural and civic life, right? And what kind of ties us together as fellow citizens. And so from my perspective, obviously, as you said, we've had a lot of artists in our district and across the state who have been, just under tremendous economic pressure as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, so many live shows and, venues closed, the ability for artists to be able to make a living, and of course, the inability of so many in our community to be able to go enjoy the arts as they once did. So I think the Congress has to be prepared to assist with all business owners who, are having to weather this economic storm. And we've done that. I would just say the CARES Act that we passed about 2.5 months ago included about, I believe, $75 million towards National Endowments for the Arts grants, which hopefully will be slated to be distributed in the coming next few weeks by June 30th. And my hope is that some of those dollars flow right here to Lafayette and to Boulder and Fort Collins and to Colorado in general. So I think there's a lot that Congress can do. We're working right now with a number of historic preservation organizations, because as you can probably imagine, our museums, right, have also taken a very, very hard hit. Our art museums in Boulder and in Denver and elsewhere, again, crown jewels, right, in the American West and really across the country. So our hope is that we can also call attention to their struggles as well, their economic pressures that they're dealing with, so that hopefully the Congress can step forward during the appropriations process to ensure that, again, those nonprofit organizations, right, have the ability to continue to pay their employees who are our neighbors, right, and ultimately can reopen as we, move towards a soft reopening of our economy and hopefully come back, even stronger than before.
Wonderful. So this is your first term as a U.S. congressman, and I'm interested to talk a little bit about your perspective and your work there. I think most of us who follow politics, and I'm a political junkie, so I'm in there digging around the headlines every day and following along. I think a lot of us at home see Washington as a place of gridlock and intransigence and those the kind of negative stereotypes that we think about when we think about the government and the way it functions. What's been your learning experience in your first year and a half there as a freshman congressman? What can you tell us from the inside?
Well, it's been a meaningful experience, that's for sure, and it's been an interesting one. And of course, it's the honor of my life, right, to be able to have the privilege and the honor to serve my neighbors and my community in the United States Congress, and to go to work every day knowing that I'm trying to make a difference for the people that I care about is tremendously impactful for me personally. There's a lot of gridlock in Washington. You're certainly not wrong about that. And some of those negative stereotypes have certainly proven to be true, in my experiences. I've been there. But that also does not tell the entire story, right? Like so much else. There's a lot of good that's happening in the United States Congress. As we talk about arts today, I'll give you a great example. There is a monument, the Women's Suffrage Monument, that a group of individuals have been really pushing to create at the federal level. As you may be familiar, there's no monument right now in honor of women's suffrage as part of the National Mall in Washington, D.C., right, of all the memorials that exist. So Jane DeDecker is actually a local world-renowned sculptor. She created this monument. She's in Loveland, and came to our office and asked us if we'd be willing to push a bill at the federal level to essentially designate a national monument to honor women's suffrage. Of course, this year in August, we'll be celebrating the 100th anniversary of the constitutional amendment providing the right to vote to all women in our country. And so we were excited, of course, to take up that bill. And what I offer this story and this example because it crystallizes to me, why the arts are so important, right? And that includes honoring our history, but also because the bill passed the United States House of Representatives unanimously. We got that bill done just about 3 months ago. And every member of our state's delegation, Republican and Democrat, co-sponsored the bill. So things can still happen in Washington if you work hard enough, right? And so I have found that experience to be a very, as I said, a very meaningful one. And I try to, find the good in things, right? And not to question people's motives. So obviously there are very, very big issues that we're trying to solve, challenges that we have to address as a country. And my hope is that the Congress can, rise to the occasion. And I'm going to keep pushing my colleagues to do that.
Excellent. So talking about you a little bit, you're in a very unusual position, I think, probably in Congress. You're a young Black man. You're the son of first-generation immigrant family, and you represent a congressional district that approaches a 90% white population. And I would imagine that gives you a unique perspective on the current events that we're seeing surrounding systemic racism and police reform and the protests happening everywhere around the country. Can you talk a little bit about that personally and what that means to you and what you'd like to see in the way of tangible actions in your district? Sure.
Well, look, I like so many others across this district, you mourned the death of Mr. Floyd, right, and the murder that took place in Minnesota. And of course, I can understand the pain and the anguish in a very visceral way as a young, African American myself. And my hope is that it does lead to systemic reforms. We are working on that end. I think that the peaceful protests that have happened across our community. I was just at a peaceful protest last night in Louisville here in our district. It's clear to me that Congress has heard their voices. The Judiciary Committee has heard their voices. That's the committee that I serve on. And so we're actually we just introduced a bill today called the Justice and Policing Act, which would make a series of systemic reforms that I think have bipartisan support, certainly in the American public. Most public polling suggests that they're widely supported by the public at large. My hope is that we can get that bill done. And so hopefully that will prevent tragedies like this from happening in the future. I think it's really, really important, and it's certainly a cause that I believe in and something I'm going to work towards. Your point about the district, I mean, of course, as you said, every congressional district is unique. I think that I represent the best congressional district in the world. It's certainly, it's one of the most educated districts, I'm sure, as you know. We have both of our state's research universities, the University of Colorado as well as Colorado State University, NOAA, NIST, 13 different federal labs. It is the most beautiful district in the country, Rocky Mountain National Park, right, and White River National Forest. And as you said, obviously the demographics of this district are different than many of my colleagues in the Congressional Black Caucus and the districts that they represent. Not all, but most. What I would say is, my sense, having really spent almost my entire life in Colorado. I moved here, when I was 6, and having spent, the last 19 years here in our district, in our community, being able to raise my daughter here, I think the fact that, I was elected to represent this district, the fact that the people of this district would put their trust and confidence in me to serve our state as the first Black congressman elected in our state's, 130 some odd year history, to me speaks to the forward-looking and thoughtful and inclusive nature of our district. And so I take great pride in that. And I think the people in our district should as well. It doesn't mean that everything's perfect, and we're always seeking to improve, right? Our democracy, our republic, our state, and our community. And that's the work that we're engaged in every day. And of course, arts play a big role, right, in highlighting some of the challenges that exist and inspiring us to do more to fix them. But I'm very proud to represent this district. I'm proud of what this community has done, and I'm looking forward to building on the progress we've made thus far.
Excellent. So the final question I want to sort of talk about is I guess a longer term, big picture question about the current turmoil we find ourselves in. We have a very divided country. The coronavirus pandemic is something that continues to rage and perhaps has taken a back seat in recent weeks. We have the upheaval surrounding systemic racism and the protests and police reform, and all of that is creating this kind of nexus of a crisis that's unlike anything in my lifetime. When you look at this kind of confluence of events, what, as a citizen, as much as an elected official, what changes or opportunities do you hope to see coming out of this time in American history? It feels like a real turning point, and I'd love to hear your perspective on what you see might come out the other side.
Well, I think you've articulated, the confluence of crises, right, that have gripped our country, and in many cases our world. You've articulated very effectively. And I think about these challenges a lot, not just obviously as a United States congressman, but I think about them as a citizen, think about them as a husband, I think about them as a father to a 2-year-old daughter who's, inheriting a world that looks very different than the world that I inherited. And I worry a great deal, in particular about the discord, the strife, the division, and our common ability to solve Herculean problems when we're so divided. And then I will say that, in those moments of frustration, or perhaps in those moments of doubt, I'm reminded that our country has done really big things before. And we've always, our country's been faced with existential challenges in the past, right? I mean, we had a civil war in the United States. And yet we've always bounced back. We've always risen to the occasion. We've always found a way to approach these problems collaboratively and to work in good faith with each other for the common good. And my hope is that we'll do the same here. I have every expectation that we will. If there is one, I guess perhaps observation I would make, right, one conclusion that I hope folks would come to, having experienced so many of these crises now in the last few months, the last few years, It is that we are really all in this together. And I think most Americans get that in a very visceral sense. I was just a few days ago volunteering at a food bank here locally in Louisville. It's wonderful community food share program, but it's providing food security to so many of our neighbors, right? A lot of people who are struggling right now with somewhere between 14 to 16% unemployment, a lot of families who are really struggling to make ends meet. And as we were taking a tour, and then myself and Senator Bennett joined me, we're helping load food for folks who were coming in. And I asked the staff there, how many of the place was pretty crowded with people who were helping load the food. And I asked the staff, how many of these folks are volunteers and how many of them are staff? And the person I was talking to, she said the vast majority of them were volunteers. This was on Friday at 10 a.m., 11 a.m. People of different colors, people of different ages, right? Black, white, old, young, folks who just decided that they're going to spend their Friday morning helping their community here, right? Helping other folks who might be in need. They're doing that. Why? Because they know that we are in this together, that there is a bond that ties us together as human beings, right? That we all care about each other and our community and our children. And I just hope that more folks will come to that realization. I think that to the extent we do, we will all be better for it, and we'll be able to really solve some of these tremendous challenges. And of course, I have no doubt that the arts are going to be a big part of what helps us come to that shared realization.
Wonderful. Well, I know this is a busy time for you and in Washington, and there's a lot going on. So I very much appreciate your time talking with us today. And thank you for your service, and thank you for what you do for the people of Colorado. And maybe we'll talk with you again down the road.
Thank you. And thank you to all the artists. Thank you for making us laugh, making us cry, making us smile, inspiring us every day. Please continue to do it.
We'll do our best. Thank you, Congressman.